come back here. They had view from there.
Should we go back
It's like
there?
sitting in the first row.
Yeah, there's like a comfy chair,
Alright, but let's do it.
And extra couch.
Yeah.
I don't like
Be
ours.
seat.
How much we
Do I need like 3D glasses or something?
They're built in. Don't worry.
Nice.
It's all good.
Good answer.
Okay, we're ready to start here. Everyone's good. Cap and Harrison got nervous. They ran away. Was it me or David? Be honest.
It was definitely me.
The angle. Okay, perfect. Everybody can see.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So, welcome back to everyone. Good to see everyone here again. Welcome to the new faces. Thanks for joining us. Tonight's title, as you guys all got, was Raising Your Numbers, Making a Case for God in the World. So there's a basic distinction between Judaism and every other religion in the world. And one of the differences, class is about God, but this is an important point to figure out. One of those differences is that in the inception of Judaism, in the creation, the inception of Judaism, there's a very big difference between Judaism and other religions. Judaism is the only religion in the world that in its creation started by knowing God. Meaning like this, the Jews experienced God in a knowledge way. They saw what he did. They had the 10 plagues. They went through the Red Sea. They had manna and the well, and it was capped off by the Sinai experience, in which the Jews, the entire nation, 3 million men, women, children, all experienced and heard the word of God, which means that they, in the most real way possible, they knew of God's existence because they experienced as a unit, the entire nation experienced God. Right? There's no better way to know someone than to interact with them and experience them. Every other religion, the way it started was an individual experienced God, and he told people that this is my experience and this is what God wants from us and you should behave like this. And the masses of the religion had to believe this person or small group as to what God actually said. But there was never that the entire nation, the entirety of the nation, knew God. It's a very basic idea in Judaism, that Judaism is a huge fan, which is known for generations, of knowledge. If you come to the Beis Medrash, you come to Data, and Jake stopped by there. I don't know if you got a chance to peek his head in and hear the excitement inside the Beis Medrash itself, but everyone's sitting there yelling and screaming at each other. And I was learning with a guy today in the Beis Medrash, and we got in a little heated debate, and he was like, he started like yelling at me, and he says, and there are people there also, he says, oh, I'm so sorry for raising my voice in here. So someone else goes like, this isn't a library, this is the Beis Medrash, you can talk in here. Like, in the Beis Medrash, in Judaism, we're very pro-knowledge, and we take it very seriously. Because by asking questions, and we always ask questions, and we'll keep asking more questions until we get to the truth. Because Judaism is very knowledge-based. And Judaism started with knowledge, which is the Mount Sinai experience, where we directly experience God. That's a very crucial idea in Judaism. Now, there's a very interesting field of study in the world. Tell me if anyone's heard of it, I'd be impressed. I only heard of it preparing for this class. It's called epistemology. Anyone? Epistemology. Okay, so epistemology is epistem means knowledge, and ology logo means study of. So it's the study of knowledge, meaning what is knowledge? What does it mean to know? It's a very philosophical question. What do we really know? What do we know? There's actually a whole entire field of this called epistemology, which is the study of thing to the class. We start and so good. You can watch it on YouTube afterwards. So the question is, what does it mean? What does it mean to know? So before we start, I want to ask everyone a question again. I have papers, we have pens this time. I want everybody to write down on this paper. We're going to hand it in blindly. No one's going to say anything. No one's going to know. From 0 to 100, what your number is, what you believe, again, where you would put God, what number you would give to God. 0 means you're absolutely certain, 100% God definitely does not exist. You can prove it, you see it, you know it. 100 means you have no doubt in your mind. There's an absolute fact and knowledge, and you know 100% clear God does exist. And then there's everyone in the world who's in between those numbers, most of us, that are between 1 and 99, and anywhere in there. And I want you to write down your own personal number. Think about it for a second. I'll put it in a blindly in a hat so nobody's going to know. And then we'll... I don't know anyone's handwriting. I'm not going to study. I don't really care. Nothing to be nervous about. Whatever you've done, you can stick it inside the red bucket. could be different than whatever you thought last time. This is not team activity. Come on, it's cheating.
I deserve some chocolate.
Oh my goodness! Again, you guys are cheating. You're cheating on. Oh my goodness.
Costly.
Okay, so
Calls into question the way that they won their.
I like that. You're arousing debate about the validity of your victory in the couples game. And you guys are like, pulling these little shticks over here, Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
That even if a person doesn't believe that, let's say, even Sinai happened or the 10 plagues and it's just a story, we're still more that we're the only religion that even claims in history that God revealed himself.
Right.
And that we all knew him. Even if we don't believe that actually happened, we're the only nation that actually claims that happened.
Right. Meaning, to claim to a masses of people that an event happened that you experienced that you weren't at is an impossibility because no one will believe you because they weren't there. The only way to suggest such a thing that you can pass it down for generations is if it happened. Or else why would anyone believe you? Unless you got 1 million people to all get in on the secret together, which doesn't happen, or at least hasn't ever happened other than in Judaism. 100%. Okay, so the question is, do you know your numbers, right? What are your numbers? And I'll tell you why this is so important. I didn't even look at those, because really the point was for you guys to figure out your number. I could throw them out right now. It's really, I'm not trying to test anyone. I want everyone to have that number in head. I want everyone to know whatever number they wrote down now. It's probably one of the most important numbers for you to know for yourself, but it's not really important for me to know your number as much as it is for you to know your number. Why is this so important? Because...
We should write the numbers at the end of the classes and then compare them.
I hear that. I like what you're saying. So why is it so important? If you look in Maimonides, it's not just a general question of, what does it mean to know? How do we believe? If you look at Maimonides writes that it's the first law in his magnum opus, the Yad HaChazak, a huge book on halacha. The absolute first halacha he writes is a mitzvah, a positive commandment for every Jew to know there is a God. Right? Not to believe there is a God, to know there is a God. That's the first question. Leida sheyesh Davar Mamsi, I think, whatever. To know there is a God. So what does it mean to know there is a God? This is a halacha. This is an obligation on each person. You have to know, wherever you're standing, you have to know there's a God. So what does it mean to know there is a God? How do we ever really know that there is a God? And we're obligated to come to that. So what exactly does that mean? So let me ask a question like this. Let's go up earlier. Knowledge versus belief. When exactly do we call something knowledge, and when do we call it a belief? Let me ask a question like this. Do you know or do you believe in World War II that it happened? Open question. Do you know or do you believe that it happened?
No.
Okay, Michael knows. Does everyone agree to that?
Should we do the paper again?
I was thinking about it, but it was too complicated. I think we're more comfortable with this conversation,
No.
You know. Okay.
You believe.
David believes. Why do you know? How do you know it happened?
I know because there's evidence.
Okay. What's the
There's
evidence?
I mean, for example, my grandfather, told me that he was involved with it.
Okay, so people telling you information is enough to consider it knowledge as opposed to belief. Take that out? You didn't experience it, but the fact that somebody told you that pushes you towards believing that it's a knowledge rather than a belief.
Sure, and as well as photographic.
Okay, there's pictures.
Evidence, pictures.
Pictures, okay. Now,
Written.
everybody knows you can find pictures online of the craziest things. You can see horses with penguin heads. You can see, you could see yourself on Mars. Nowadays, world pictures are basically of no real value because you can make a picture of anything, right?
Yeah, but there are also sciences that can debunk what are fake photos.
Okay. So it's enough of a proof, meaning it's probably real. So you consider it knowledge. Why do you say it's not knowledge?
So it depends on how you define knowledge.
Right, that's what we're trying to beat out here,
Right,
100%.
so you're going by a percentage. So if you can take all of the information that's there and say that based on photographic and witness testimony and all of these things that you have a knowledge that this is more likely to have happened. But unless you personally saw it yourself, it's very hard to get to the point where you say that it's 100%.
Right. So what you're saying basically, in all of life, there's almost nothing that you know.
Correct.
Your life is the way you perceive it. The answer to the question of knowledge versus belief is basically your entire life is based on beliefs, and there's basically nothing that we really know. What do we know?
It might
We
be
know a little bit, whatever.
A little overstated, but yes.
Okay.
I agree. We don't know that electrons exist.
True.
We've never
Right.
seen an electron.
Right.
Okay.
But
That's fine.
we're using them right now.
Fine. Let me ask you another question. Do you have any doubt that World War II happened?
No.
So you have no doubt that World War II happened. It's just still considered a belief, not a fact, because you can't prove it. But you don't have any doubt in it, right? Fine. Right? If everyone agrees to that? Now, why do we have no doubt? Let's take that approach. Why do we have no doubt? So if I would tell you, if I would have started this and said, something that you believe to be true, and you have no doubt that it's false, is that called knowledge or not? So you're saying, because we're having this conversation from a technical aspect, most people would probably consider that knowing something. If you have no chance of, meaning I don't have any possibility in mind of it being wrong. So most people would say I know that, but you're right. Technically, it is more of a belief. That's what I'm trying to say is that knowledge and belief really exist on a continuum. And think about everything in life. Think about the North Pole. Do you believe the North Pole exists, or do you know the North Pole exists? Did you ever talk to someone who was even there? Probably not. So you've seen pictures. Here's a nice picture of it. This could have been in the middle of New Zealand for all. I have no clue. Someone put a thing down and put a picture. Like it said on Google Images this was the North Pole, but like I don't have any clue, right? But we consider that we know that there is a North Pole in the world. Let's go back even a little further. Let's take it back to the Civil War. Civil War. Do we believe the Civil War happened, or do we know the Civil War happened? It's a little further now. We don't have grandparents that told us they were there. Pictures aren't as clear, mostly drawings. So do we know it or do we believe it? Obvious says he knows it. I'd say I know it also.
Right.
Anyone?
Yeah,
I mean, and I would also say, how do you define the Civil War? Is it just a fight between the United States or at the time,
North and the South.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, it's no North and the South, or are you saying that this particular battle and this particular story happened
No, I'm
within
saying
that
that
battle?
the entire Civil War happened. That there was ever a battle between the Confederate and the North, and there was ever slavery in America, and whatever, everything you want to add to that. Any of that happened. How do we know that? I mean, all the history books told us that. All our teachers in U.S. history told us that.
Actually, human record.
So we have human records of people telling us stuff, and we don't really have any reasonable doubt to doubt that it's true. So if I would ask our non-knowers here, if we ask a non-knower couch, do you have any doubt that the Civil War happened? There's no real doubt the Civil War happened, right? So for all intents and purposes, we're very confident, whether we call it knowledge or belief, we're very confident that this happened. And we all know that, even though we have no personal, real knowledge of it, and we don't really know anything that happened in it, but everyone told us that, and we don't really have any reason not to say that, even though there are people that deny the Holocaust happened, right? So that means if you ask the wrong people, you might get fed the wrong information, but we don't really see any validity to them because it seems obvious to us the other part, and we consider that knowledge. What I'm trying to bring out, the point I'm trying to bring out is that in our general day's life, there are things we consider fact, call it knowledge, call it belief. There are things we accept as facts that are not actually 100 on our 0 to 100 scale, right? World War II is not 100. David said it's not 100. It's 99.999. Whatever. I don't know. It's not 100. We didn't experience it. According to David, someone else might disagree with that. All these numbers are personalized. If you go to the North Pole, I don't know. I'd give it probably like a 99. Probably exists. Like I'd be very surprised if it didn't exist. I don't know. I never went there. I didn't see that sign myself. The Civil War for sure. I'll give that a 97. I don't know. I mean, it's on the scale. Maybe I'd say it's a 75. I don't know. It really probably happened. 75 is pretty high. That means it's almost for sure happened. I just don't know 100% because I didn't experience it. I don't know so much about it. So the point is that you have to figure out in your own lives to try to be consistent. And consistency is the key here. And the question in consistency is where do we consider for ourselves the number that in our general lives is enough for us to consider something fact. And it's not 100. For none of us it's 100. We accept stuff all the time that we just don't have questions on, that we don't really think about it. We actually have no clue whether or not it's actually true or not. We just work with it because we have no reason to doubt it. And we call that knowledge, we call that knowing things. Right? But do we actually know it or not? So find that number and we have to be consistent. When we're talking about knowing God, we're talking about that same concept. Which means what? It means we have, pardon the pun, but I'm a rabbi, so I'm allowed to. We have data points. Right? So, what do you mean? It means you gather all the points and you see where are the points pointing towards. If all of the points and all the data points are all pointing towards something and we don't really have any arrows or anything pointing away from it, then we have no reason to suspect that it's not true. So you got to look and you got to see where is everything pointing to. So our job in trying to raise our numbers of does God exist, what's our job here? Our job is to recognize what does it mean to know something. What do we know? Do we believe? What it means to know something is we got to look at the world. We got to look at ourselves. We got to look at everything. Look at history. Look at Everything we can look at and figure out where is the arrow pointing to. We might not get to 100, no one's going to get to 100, but you don't have an obligation to get to 100. You have an obligation to know, says Maimonides. What does know mean? It's a personal question. Everyone has that point. Some people know much earlier than other people know. Maybe the most important number you can figure out is you spend some time thinking. It's an interesting question, Rabbi Siegel said. In life, where do I make that call? What do I consider knowing things, even though I don't really know them, but I don't doubt it at all. And if I have no reason to doubt it, then it probably is. So tonight, I want to quickly go through some data points, see where the arrows are pointing, and suggest that we actually could see a significant amount in our world of where God is, or where the arrows are pointing. And the question is really, how do we know? How do we know? If I were not a rabbi, I'd probably have cute cat pictures up. But because I'm a rabbi, I put cute baby pictures up. That's just how it works. So, how do we know? Quick vote. What's the best one? Anyone? Come on.
Right.
It's pretty good.
Center, bottom center.
Just bigger.
No, it's cute.
Pretty cute.
Asian babies are very cute.
Pretty good.
What's the time?
Yeah.
Which is the time?
The time is suspenders.
Oh, the time. Hi, Sven.
Yeah.
Okay, so you...
Yeah.
See, everyone has different things that talk to them in life, you know? Did we get any double vote here, or did everybody pick something else?
We double voted again.
What did you double vote on?
Second from the bottom right.
This one?
Yeah,
He's my Kriegsman.
I like that one too.
Okay. I feel bad for a second. He's got the little peg in his face, like ruins his cuteness a little bit, you know? Like it's not really fair. Anyways, the question is, how do we know? Right? So, the place to look is at our world. Look at the world around us. Let's see, what does the world point to? Does the world point to no God? Or does the world point to God? So, the first place to discuss this is really at the inception of the world. So, you take your classic, good old Campbell's primordial soup, and you try to figure out what happened in the beginning of this world. What does the world tell us about the beginning of this world? So, there's a great classic story where there was a group of scientists, and the scientists get together and they go to God and say, God, you did a great job, you created the world, you got us here, but we don't really need you anymore, we're doing great now, we got it all figured out. Leave us alone, you do your thing, we'll do our thing, we're good. Leave it up to us. And to prove it, give us a test. God says, all right, give you a test. He said, go make man. He said, sure, no problem. Go to the backyard, take a wheelbarrow, fill it up with dirt, grab a couple bottles of Ozarka water, start wheelbarrowing towards the laboratory. All of a sudden God says, hey, what are you guys doing? So what do you want to be doing? So let's make man, we're going to make man. He's like, yeah, but you got to get your own ingredients. Okay, tough crap, fine. Anyways, the point is like this, bring your own ingredients, right? All right. Where did the world start from? Let's work with the infrastructure of the Big Bang. The Big Bang created the world started with the Big Bang, right? So what happened before the Big Bang? Where did the Big Bang start from? So this is a website over here called space.com. It's a reputable scientific website. It's definitely no connection to religion or Judaism at all. Check it out. Look it up. It's one of the more reputable scientific websites. This is an article that they wrote explaining the basic history and knowledge of the Big Bang. I want to point out one paragraph here. I don't like reading in general, but so the very beginning of the universe remains pretty murky. Scientists think they can pick the story up at about 10 to the minus 36 seconds. 1/trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second after the Big Bang. So again, what is this saying? This is saying that science can explain everything. Here's a little map of what exactly happened with the Big Bang. Here it is at 10 to the minus 43rd second. This is what happened. We can put each thing what happened until we get to present day, which will come up, right? 15 billion years later. Science can only start a trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second. This is a very small amount. After the Big Bang, we can explain every single thing scientifically that happened from then until today. And how every single thing evolved and changed and went to the next thing. But there is absolutely no explanation of what happened before that first trillionth of a second. Because nothing existed. We don't know how that's possible for something to come from nothing. Now, obviously, science is never going to claim the answer is God, because God is not a scientific creation. It's not testable in a laboratory, and the answer can't be God in the scientific world. That doesn't stop many scientists from believing in God, but it's not going to be the answer to a scientific question. But to a human person who's not living in the laboratory and who's thinking, this is a pretty compelling data point. Do your own research. Everything I'm going to present to you tonight, I don't expect you to just accept what I'm saying and love it. I would get the biggest enjoyment if every single thing that I say, you go look up online afterwards and you challenge it and you call me back and you say, Moshe, I want to go out for coffee. I disagree with every single slide you showed tonight. And I want to go through with you. I would be so excited for you to do that. I'm not trying to hide anything from you. I'm not trying to pull anything over your eyes. Every single point I'm saying here, to me, is an obvious proof data point pointing in that direction. I would love for everyone here to do their own research and prove me otherwise, and I would love to discuss that with you. The world started, science could trace it back to a trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second. Before that, we don't know what there was because nothing existed. Like we spoke last time, God exists before time, before the Big Bang, before anything happened. Nothing, literally nothingness exists before the Big Bang. So how could it start? We don't know. Fine. Data point A. Let's move on. Jason's our local engineer, and he knows much more about thermodynamics than I know. I can barely pronounce the word, but he just makes it. But there is a concept called thermodynamics, which I really don't know so much about, but it's a fascinating point that anyone who wants to look into this more can look into this more as well. There's 3 laws of thermodynamics, which is basically the laws of energy in our world. The second law of thermodynamics is that the world is basically entropy, which is that the world starts in order, and the world is going towards less order. And the problem with this is that, without getting into evolution, because evolution, there's more reasons to kind of, you could weasel out of evolution, explaining how evolution is the opposite of that, that's going from less order to higher order, but there's ways of getting out of that. But in the creation of the beginning of the initial anything again, evolution happens to be a big question mark on this. Again, evolution states that things went from lower level order to higher level order. Entropy, which is a law. Entropy is not a theory. Entropy is a law. The laws of thermodynamics are laws that they're proven and accepted by every single person who understands them in the world. Right? So how could you, if there's a law in the world that the world is going towards disorder, towards chaos, how could there be a system in the world where the entire world is developing towards higher level order? And even if you're going to explain that, which there's different theories, inside and outside, whatever, different ways of getting into it, not getting too involved right now, the beginning of anything is almost impossible to explain. There's no good scientific explanation as to how basic life could have started from nothing. It's against the laws of science. And I encourage everybody here to do their own research, but it is against the laws of the world to, which basically what I'm pointing out is that you can have 2 things proven in the world, but they don't work in synthesis together. You can have a theory of evolution, you can have a theory of the world started with amino acids and primordial soup and it developed into something bigger, but that itself doesn't necessarily fit with everything else science is saying, right? That doesn't actually fit with the law of entropy, which is considered a law. So how do we reconcile these 2? So either one of them have to give, or God's pretty cool. It's another option. The law of entropy. Let's move on. So, beyond the creation of the world, we have a concept called nature and the human body. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Hashem.com. Everyone here know Rabbi Klatzko? Klatzko's been here a bunch of times. Rabbi Klatzko has put together a website which he calls Hashem.com. This is the intro that ripped off his website from all of his videos. And the purpose of his website is examining complexity and design in the universe. Hashem.com. And if you look in the world, take anything. There's so many examples of it. The human eye, the amount of nerve endings in the optic nerve, there's millions, and if you lose a few of them, you go blind, which is unparalleled in the complexity of how the eye interprets information and can see it, that looks as normal and fluid and flowing to us, to even anything close to the greatest camera that exists in the world. And you look at a seed, you take a little seed, you put that little seed inside of the ground. What happens in the ground? It breaks apart. Inside that seed is the ability to make roots, to make bark, to make trees, to make leaves. Leaves have green, happen to be green. They have photosynthesis. They take energy in from the sun. That creates nutrients to which also come from the ground. It goes up. They're able to produce together an orange. An orange is perfectly wrapped in a container so that it doesn't get moldy, or it doesn't get eaten, or it doesn't dry out. Inside the orange, you open it up, and there's actually 20 different individually wrapped pieces of orange. And inside this piece of orange, if you open that up, there's actually a few thousands of individually wrapped, even smaller pieces of orange. It's incredible if you just look at one seed, one orange, your human eye. That's just 2 parts, an eye and an orange, of the entire world we live in, of billions of things, the human body itself. The fact that all of these systems interact with each other in a way that we don't even have to think about it. I'm just looking at everyone here now, and you can all look at this PowerPoint. And at the same time, you're hearing me. And at the same time, I'm standing and walking. And all of these things are coming. I challenge everyone again, if you look at the world, You look at, that's just one orange tree. Look at 1,000 other trees in the world, or every animal, or rocks. There's endless. You look at the world, and the world is screaming. This doesn't just happen on its own. And look at the probabilities. Go search. Look, don't trust anything Rabbi Siegel says. I want you to challenge everything I'm saying. Go look at what the probabilities are. How is it actually possible that the world started as a primordial soup, and this evolved into everything, into the complexity of our world, from rocks to trees to people with all of their systems and all of their cells and all of them operating and developing into different ways. It is a scientific impossibility for that to happen. Now, is it possible? Yeah, we're talking like 99.99999 to 0.0001. Is it 100? The answer is no. It's never going to be 100. But knowledge isn't 100. Knowledge is whatever you wrote down, your knowledge is. Whatever knowledge means to you is what knowledge is. And if you look at the world and you research it and try to figure out what is that chance, can I explain that 0.01% chance? You could explain it. There's ways out. If you need to explain things in a scientific way, if there's a desire to do so, it's explainable. But if you look at the possibility that happened without an intellectual designer behind it, that happened as a matter of probability and just happened to be like that, it's much less likely that it happened than the Civil War didn't happen, I would say. But again, just another data point. Let's move on. One aspect of seeing God, of knowing God, of data points of God in the world, is our world itself. We discussed that our world, what's our world, the creation of our world, seems to imply God. The reality of our world, of ourselves, seems to imply God. Now let's talk about miracles for a second. When God does miracles in our world. So, when I say miracle, what's everyone thinking of? Do a miracle. What's a miracle? For an example, if I were to do a miracle for you right now, what could I do now to be miraculous?
Lift up this house.
Levitate, right there. It's a classic example of a miracle. You're levitating, that's a miracle, right? Is that a miracle?
Things that go against nature.
Okay, things that go against nature. Okay. So that's considered miraculous, things that go against nature, right? I'm with you. So I want to tell a few very interesting things, and I want to show you that we actually do have in our world nowadays, there's miracles all around us. There's things that go against nature, and it's a question of looking. And this is what's such an important point, and this is probably the main point of tonight, is that when you realize what it means to know, sometimes you have to just be looking in the right places, and we just never thought, never thought of an orange tree before. It's actually pretty cool. You take that little seed, and it has inside of that all the information, and the system works. When you cut off a branch of a tree, all of the nutrients from that branch, all quickly, before you finish, you start cutting it off, quickly leave that branch and go to the rest of the tree so they don't lose that nutrients to nothing, and it quickly runs to the rest of the tree before the branch gets cut off. Like, that's awesome. Okay, anyways, so the greatest miracle that we've seen in nowadays is the existence of the land of Israel. It is an absolute miracle. If you look at the process of how the land of Israel came to be, and how the group of non-organized fighters took down complete armies of other nations. If you look at the battles, they don't make any sense. And I want to bring this out from a very interesting thing. Everyone here has heard of West Point Academy, right? Everyone knows what that is? West Point, what's West Point? Officer training. Right? West Point is for the U.S. Army training. Now, I want to tell you a few interesting things about West Point. I'm going to tell you 3 stories about West Point to bring out this point. This first story was said by Rabbi Usher Wade. Rabbi Usher Wade is a very interesting story himself. He actually was I don't remember what denomination, but he was a minister, and he was very questioned a lot about World War II. He was very bothered by it. Was led him to a lot of questions, until he eventually left his church, converted, and I actually got from him once a tour of Yad Vashem. He was a very big expert in World War II. He used to give tours, I don't think he does it anymore, of Yad Vashem, which is the Israeli Holocaust Museum in Israel, which is very, very cool. So he writes a story that he knew a guy. This guy was a non-religious Jew who wasn't interested at all. Came 13, his parents told him, you got to get a bar mitzvah. He's like, I don't want a bar mitzvah. We'll give you a lot of presents. He says, okay. Goes to shul, never steps in again. That was the type of person he was. When he turned 20, he enlisted in West Point. Rabbi Wade says he didn't see him for a lot longer. All of a sudden he bumps into him one day and he sees this guy, and he had this guy wearing a yarmulke. And he sees this guy, this army guy in a yarmulke. So what happened? Why are you wearing a yarmulke? He says, let me tell you a story. He's like, I applied to West Point, and I sat in class. I was under a 3-star general. And he was teaching the class was on ancient battles. And they were going through various ancient battles, what we see from those battles, what we learn from those battles, teaching us about ancient battles. And I'm sitting here, and I don't know anything about Judaism. And I noticed that they're never once talking about any Jewish battles. And I'm like, the Jews have a long history. And they don't discuss the battle of against the Egyptians. And they didn't discuss the battle of conquering the land, the battle of Joshua and Jericho. And they didn't discuss all ancient Jews, the Greeks, they didn't discuss any Jewish battles. So I raise my hand. And I say, I don't know, what do you say, sir, officer, general? I don't know, whatever you, probably the appropriate salutation, whatever it is. Sir, why haven't you mentioned any of the ancient Jewish battles? And he looks at me and he screams and he says, see me in my office after class. I really had no clue what he seemed really upset. I had no clue what he did. So after class, he goes to this guy's office, next to his desk, he says, close the door. Guy closes the door, turns on the door. When he turns around, he sees this officer hovering over him, screaming at him like he's enraged, waiting to basically eat him alive. He's so scared. It's one of his first days there. He says, why'd you embarrass me in class like that? He says, I don't even know what I did. Trying to get the words out. I don't know what I did. He said, listen, I know you're Jewish. I know you called me out on that. Everybody knows that there's absolutely no logical way to explain anything that happened to any of the ancient Jewish battles. No one studies them. There's nothing to learn from them. I know you're Jewish. I know you called me out to make me look stupid. Don't ever do that again or I'll kill you. And the guy's in shock. And he goes out. He goes to the barracks. And he's searching for a yarmulke. Finally finds a yarmulke and he sits on his bed. He cries for the next 2 hours. Tells everyone, wait. He says, I've been Jewish for 20 years, and I never realized how special the Jewish people were. I never knew what that meant. Story one, that was from Rabbi Wade. There's another guy I know here, Bill McManaway. Goes to Tuesday night break now with Rabbi Epstein. He's around. He's a real life person. Rabbi Wade lives in Israel. He's a psychologist, harder to get to. Bill McManaway lives in Frisco, I think. Comes to class here. This you could easily validate with him. Next stories are from him. So, Bill McManaway was a higher up. I don't know exactly what his position was, but he was in West Point for many years. And he was significantly high up in West Point. And he said a few things. He said, first of all, it's absolutely true. He said, we never study any of Israel's wars because every single war of Israel goes completely opposite to everything that all war battles teach us, and there's almost nothing we can ever learn from any of the battles of Israel. In 1973, there was a battle called the Battle of the Valley of Tears. Was heard of it? It's part of the Yom Kippur War. Imek Havacha, Valley of Tears. You can see here, right, was one armored brigade against an infantry division, all casualties, decisive Israeli victory. This is taken from Wikipedia. You can search it yourself, Valley of Tears. So the U.S. Army sent a group of, I think it was 4 people, to go to Israel after. This is one of the greatest recent history tank battles that existed. It was a large tank battle, one of the biggest ones in recent history. The American Army sent a group of 4 people, one of which was Bill McManaway, to Israel to study, to find out, to see what they could learn from this war. So they went to Israel, him and this group of other people, and they took in all the information, whatever it was. They come back to West Point. They're sitting down, they're presenting the findings. The person in charge is talking to the people, and the guy says to them, throw it in the garbage. So what do you mean? He says, throw it in the garbage. So why? This doesn't make any sense to anything we know about tank battles. There's no explanation. There's absolutely nothing we can learn about this to apply to any other situations. This is not helpful at all about it. It's a true story. You can ask Bill. Comes every Tuesday night. If you'd ask him, he was there. He went to Israel himself. If you go to, Bill said, if you look at the casualty, I forgot to tell you, it's called the loss exchange rate, which is basically how much one side loses relative to the other side losing in a battle or in a war. He said the numbers with the war from Israel to the other nations relative to any other war in history, wars of the United States in second place, and it's not even close. He said if you look at all of the Israeli wars, they're all screaming. Bill McManaway was not Jewish, and I don't know this for sure because I didn't ask him, but he comes to classes a lot. He's very interested and excited with Judaism. I think a lot of this is because when you see this and you realize it, and here he said that there was a certain group of generals that kind of met together to discuss every once in a while. Everyone knows they never talk about Israeli battles. It's one of the rules. They don't talk about it. Once they had a new guy who was, recently raised up to that level, and he said something about, something about the Israel battles, whatever it was, and everyone's like, there's nothing you can learn from these 8 battles. And he says as a joke, maybe it was like God. Bill's like, nobody laughed. It was quiet in the room. He said, everyone who's analyzed them knows that not a single thing about any of the wars makes any sense. Amazing thing. Look at yourself again. Talk to Bill. Give his email address. It's really an amazing thing. Fine. When we talk about miracle, what's like the classic miracle we always think about in Judaism? What's like the greatest miracle God ever did for the Jews?
Splitting the Red Sea.
Nice. Rabbi Siegel called one. Here we go. Splitting of the Red Sea. I did not put that there just now. So, right, splitting of the Red Sea is the greatest miracle. I have a question for you. Why is this a great miracle? Do you happen to know that if you would have looked on the radar that day, the verse says explicitly in Exodus that there was a strong eastern wind that had been blowing the entire night. Strong eastern wind was blowing the entire night, and it blew so strong. This is the Torah. This is not like some, somebody making this up to explain it. The Torah says there was a strong eastern wind blowing, and it blew over the sea. So, where's the miracle? It's a perfect explanation. The Torah itself says the explanation. The Torah says an eastern wind blew open the sea. What's miracle? Why did everyone say that was the greatest miracle God ever did? It says in the Torah it wasn't a miracle. It was an eastern wind.
Happened at the right time.
Happened at the right time. I'll tell you, this happened to me. This story happened to me. Stephen Hawking has a Talmud Mufhak, an expert disciple who's a strong atheist. I can't remember his name. He wrote something of dinosaurs. He's something of dinosaurs. I don't remember the name. Anyways, I was in Yeshiva University. I was in YU at the time, and it was big news. He's coming to campus. This guy, who's like known and all I feel like he's a big atheist. He hates God. Anyways, they hand selected one class that he was going to merit visiting and speaking to. Guess who was in that class? Here's truly, right? Of all the classes in YU, he had to pick to my English 101 class. He came to speak to us. So I was not so excited about this, but you have to go to class because that's how you pass. And I went to class. And I sat that day like the back of the class. I'm normally pretty involved in class, but I sat in the back and like, I'm not trying to argue with this guy. I have nothing to gain from this. I'm just going to be quiet and sit in the back. And he happened to be a horribly crass, inappropriate person who our teacher was like really excited to have him. Like when he left, she's like, oh, like, did you guys like also just like feel like he was just like a dirty person? Anyway, so that's just a little background, not really necessary, but just bring back the story in my head. So like this, he's talking about evolution, or whatever's talking about. He's talking about the Bible. Like, yeah, like the Bible. All we ever learned about when I was a kid in the Bible was Lot and his daughters, and Noah and his son. That's all we ever talked about. He's like, yeah, and the miracles. He's like, and he calls on me. He calls me out. I was dressed basically as I am now, minus the tie. So it's pretty obviously Jewish, So, I mean, we were all Jewish, but he wanted to call me out for obvious reasons. So he calls me out and he says, like, look, even like the Red Sea split, the eastern wind blew the whole time. I'm like, come on, like, what's so great about that? You believe in that story? She said, what do you have to say about that? So he called me out, so I had to respond. So, what did I say? That's what I said. So I said, let me ask you a question. How many times in the history of the world has the eastern wind blown? I don't know, probably a lot of times the eastern wind blew, right? There was a point in time in history where there was a Jewish nation. They were trapped. In front of them was a sea. There was nowhere to run. Behind them was the superpower of the world, the Egyptian nation. Right behind them. And they're trapped in this little circle. You have half of it's Egyptian army, half of it's sea. There happens to be an eastern wind blows. Only one time in the history of the world has there ever been an eastern wind that blew so strongly that it blew the water up exactly when the Jews were in the situation. The Jews crashed through, and as soon as the last Jew finished crossing through, the eastern wind subsided, and the water came crashing down on the Egyptians. And as far as we know, we've never seen an eastern wind ever do that again since then. I said, is that not a miracle? Awkwardly silent in the room afterwards. I was feeling very proud. And he switched the topic back to some other thing that he switched the topic to. He didn't call me again. So I won. But that's really the question. The question is, what is a miracle? Does a miracle mean that you have to do something that you have to levitate off the ground right now? What does a miracle really mean in Judaism? What's the point of a miracle? Why did God make that happen? And I'll tell you another great example in Judaism, the Ark, right? Everyone knows Noah's Ark? Do you ever go to the zoo? Do you know how big Noah's Ark was? Like maybe the size of like two of these houses, maybe? You ever go to the zoo? You know how much space you need to fit every single animal in the world? There is absolutely no way possible in the dimensions Torah gives for the Ark that every single animal fit on that Ark. It is not possible. Do the math, calculate it. It is impossible. So why did he build an Ark? It was a miracle. It didn't fit. God made it fit. So why did he build an Ark? Doesn't make any sense. It was a waste of his time. He did for 120 years he spent building this Ark, which in the end didn't fit everything. It just kind of all fit on anyways. So Nachmanides writes, the reason he did it is because God doesn't like to break nature any more than he has to. What does it mean that God, what does a nace, what does a miracle really mean? So there's actually 3 different words you find with it. The Hebrew word for miracle is the word nace. Nace means a miracle. There's 3 other words you find with the word nace. The first one, David just pointed out, the word banner is called nace. The verse says, Herimu nace, lift up a banner. That's word number one. Word number two, miracle. Like we said, the word nes means miracle. And the word number three is test. Hebrew word for test is a nisayon. Test. What's the common denominator between these three things? What is a miracle? What's the point of a miracle? A miracle is God saying in the background, waving. Hi everyone, I'm here. Right? What's a banner? You flip a banner. A banner means lift a banner to show there's something here. You show where you are. That's what a miracle is. What's the point of a miracle? It doesn't matter how it happened. A miracle could have been through an Easter wind. God, like we said from the ark, God likes minimizing his intervention in nature to the maximum possible. But he made an Easter wind blow only one time in nature to make that water split for the Jews to pass there. What was he doing? He was saying, hey, I'm here. Why does God test us? What's the point of a test? It's the same thing. That's why God tests us. Somewhat off topic, but God tests us to say, hey, I'm here. Do you believe that I'm here? Can you see me in this? The point of the test is to see that God is there also. That's the point. All these three things. The point of miracle is for you to say God is here. And if you think, open up for anyone who wants to share anything, for sure stories like this in my life, when you think about it, was there ever a story where God told you, I'm here? Right? It's a miracle. Think about it. Well, because it happened in a natural way. The splitting of the Red Sea also happened in a natural way. A miracle is when you feel, when you see God standing behind, look at those data points, you see it, it's very possible, most probable, and you say, here I am, here's God. And we'll open the floor after if anyone wants to share something. I have a great story if you want, but we'll open up after the class. Okay, so we have miracles which exist today, tomorrow. You can look at, go on about that more. We have the world. All these things are pointing towards God. And the last place is the Torah itself. The Torah itself actually proves God, even though God proves the Torah. And we went through these in Torah and creation also. I just want to quickly bring them out here from a different perspective, but it's the same concept. And that is that the Torah is divine given from God. And not only did God give the Torah, but the Torah actually proves God's existence. How does the Torah do that? If you look in Leviticus 11, verse 4 through 7, you find a special list of 4 animals. These 3 and that one. There are rules for kosher animals. Kosher animal rule number 1, you got to chew your cud. Rule number 2, you got to have split hooves. Those are the rules. You got to have split hooves, chew your cud. The Torah writes 4 animals that exist in the world that have one and not the other. There's one animal that has split hooves, doesn't chew its cud. By the way, that's why the pig sleeps his feet forward. If you ever see a pig sleeping, he's showing that he's really pure, even though he's not. Don't eat pig. And then the 3 other animals that chew their cud don't have split hooves. It says the Torah are the only ones. Go check in the rest of the world, you figure it out. The Torah didn't need to mention anything about this. The Torah was written, you have to have chew your cud. If the Torah was written by man, you wouldn't want to risk being totally wrong. You would just write only eat things that had chew their cud and have split hooves. If you were to just write that, you'd be safe because you would never make funny claims about the rest of the world. But the Torah doesn't. The Torah boldly claims these are the only examples. Go find it. Number 2, Leviticus 11, 9 through 10. We'll go quickly through these. And that is the laws of fish. The laws of fish have to have fins and they have to have scales. Now the Torah says another amazing thing, and this is true in halacha, even we pass them like this. The Torah says every fish in the world that has scales will have fins. Not every fish that has fins will have scales. Which means that if you go to a fish store and you want to buy a piece of fish, and you can't see any fins on this fish, but you see there's scales. Fish don't need shechita. If you look at the kosher, quick shout out to the laws of kosher class on YouTube, PowerPoint presentation, check it out. We talk about this more in detail. But technically you could go to any kosher, any non-kosher, any fish store, doesn't require ritual slaughter. All it requires is making sure that you know they didn't use non-kosher knives on it or any other non-kosher ingredients on it. But if you buy a raw fish, technically you can buy it from a non-kosher fish market. Let's say you see scales on it, but not fins. Says the Torah, you could eat it. You don't see any fins, it's fine. It says, God, I guarantee you every single fish that has scales has fins. Why would you guarantee this? What's the point? If it wasn't God talking, why would you say this? The answer is you wouldn't. But if you are God talking, then you can say whatever you want because you know the world you created and it exists inside of that, and you can say every single fish that has scales has fins. Go eat any fish that you find that has scales. Example number 2. Example number 3. Exodus 34:24. Amazing, amazing, amazing verse. This is the law of what we call in Hebrew aliyah l'regel, going up to the Temple Mount. There's an obligation for every Jewish male 3 times a year, wherever you're living in Israel, to go up to the temple and visit with God on the holiday of Passover, Shavuos, and Sukkot, 3 times a year. Now, there's an obvious problem with this. Go back to our West Point studies, right? You could Google when is Passover 2018, and everyone in the world will quickly find out when Passover is. You can Google when is Shavuot, and even though people haven't heard of Shavuot, if you Google it, it'll still tell you the answer, exactly what date it is, and Sukkot, right? So any single non-Jewish army that wants that will say, every single Jew, older than 13, is not every Jewish male is going to be out of the entire country except in Jerusalem during these dates. Well, that'd be a pretty good time to go attack. If only the women and kids are home, that would be a good idea. Says God, 34:24, look at it inside. Go up 3 times a year, you have nothing to worry about. No one will attack you when you go up to Jerusalem, because I'll protect you. It's the stupidest thing to say if you're not God. Why? Because people will do it once and then they'll all die. And then we wouldn't be here today. But we are, because they did it. And God protected them. The stories in the Midrash about exactly what happened, how did that play out? But again, it is an explicit verse in the Torah saying, every single Jewish male over than 13, on this date, I want you in Jerusalem. The non-Jews had it since ancient Greek, the Septuagint. Torah was art-scrolled into other languages. Everybody knew what it was. It wasn't a secret. Yet the Jewish nation survived, and no one ever attacked them. Doesn't make any sense, unless you're God. Last example, Leviticus 25:21. And that is the laws of Shemitah. Now, Shemitah is one of the craziest laws in the world. Anybody know what Shemitah is? Shemitah is that you can't, every 7th year, the entire land of Israel lays fallow, and you can't plant or harvest anything. Now, even if you want to tell me from an agricultural perspective, it makes sense to let the land rest once every 7 years. I'll tell you a very genius thing that Moshe Siegel himself could think of without God. Break up the land into 7 parts. Do rotate parts that each part of the land will rest one out of every 7 years, while the other 6 sevenths are producing fruit, and they can each support that 7th. So there's always food production. Everyone can stay alive. Meanwhile, you're allowing the land to resuscitate itself. You would never make the entire land stop at the same time. That's foolish. How are you going to eat? So Torah says. You might ask, how are you going to eat? Leviticus 25:21. How are you going to eat? Where's the food going to come from? You're not planting. Says God, don't worry. The 6th year, you'll have a double crop, 6th year. You're going to be fine. I mean, it either happens or it doesn't. If it doesn't happen, then you don't do it again the next time around, right? But the Torah continued. They did it for years and years and years, generations and generations. Because God could promise whenever God wants to promise. And what's the message God was showing? The message of the Shemitah is that your sustenance comes from God. Your work comes from God. We think we work, we make lots of money, we do everything ourselves. But once every 7 years, God wants to remind the Jewish nation, I'm helping you guys out. I'm behind all this. Your work, everything comes from me. Think about it. You won't have anything this year? I'll take care of you. It's a means of recognizing God. I think so there's 4 explicit proofs in the Torah. The Torah itself seems to imply God's existence because, if not, they're all unexplainable.
So what happens in Israel now? What's the modern day?
Israel, not modern day Shemitah.
Right.
So there's actually an amazing thing. Modern day Shemitah, there are plenty of religious farmers that will not plant during the 7th year. That happens nowadays. There's some amazing, more miracle stories. I don't know these stories well enough, but I've read a few of them, of amazing stories of certain Jews that decided to not plant their fields during that year, and you find that, I can't say the story next, I don't really know what it says. I'll send you the story. But you found that the entire everyone who planted stuff got ruined that year, and there's nothing to get in there. The next one was ruined for the next one. So there's amazing stories like that. Rabbi Epstein has a story which I don't recall if I need that, but you should ask Rabbi Epstein if you see him. He says it was a Mashiach and a cilantro plant somewhere. I don't know where or when this was. And the cilantro came from Israel. And he said he asked them, he can ask them for exact details because I don't know it. I had this conversation with them a while ago. He asked them, what do you do to get it from Israel? What do you do every 7th year? And they said, it wasn't a problem. Every 6 years I've already gotten a double crop. We had a tremendous portion. We haven't had to run out of cilantro. Ask Rabbi Epstein. Sorry, I'm telling you I didn't make this up. Could be heated, but I didn't make it up. Fine. The greatest miracle and the greatest proof that God exists, one of the greatest, and that is, you have in Dallas, Texas tonight, I don't know, I'm not going to count, I'm not supposed to count people, 10, 12, 15 Jews, 2017, that exist, right? Famous article by Mark Twain. The greatest proof of God to me is the existence of the Jewish people. The fact that there's Jews that exist in the world, now, do you guys think about this for a second about, I mean, we live in such peaceful, nice times now. That's why a lot of these things I'm trying to say that are really just bringing it to consciousness. It's things we know about. It's just thinking about them. You look at Jewish history, it is absolutely insane that any of us, because you know how many people tried killing us and killing us and killing us and killing us, and they were successful in a large amount? Never completely. It's a crazy thing. And there are Jews that still exist now that are coming together to learn Torah on Wednesday night, harvest time. It's miraculous. Think about the perspective of history from that. It really doesn't make any sense. It's really amazing. And I don't know why, because God gave a promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that his kids will never be totally cut off, will never die, will never be totally gone. There will always be Jews that will be learning Torah, that will be keeping Torah, they'll be following, and they'll be bringing God's message to the world, because that's the point of the world, which we'll get to more next time. So the greatest miracle, if the other data points didn't add up till now, is looking eternally and looking at everyone around you. And thinking about the special gift we have, that we are here together, and that we have Torah, and nowadays especially that we have, it's really a miracle in history that we have peace, that we're able to, I've been nervous someone's going to knock on our door and come in and arrest us all for learning Torah. It's an amazing, that itself's like a miracle, historical miracle if you look at it like that. But we're able to. So I hope I presented some interesting data points tonight towards showing God in the world. Open the floor up to questions if anyone has any questions. Great, thank you everyone so much for coming.